really big moment in the history of hockey development happening shortly here, where Gavin McKenna, the presumptive number one pick in next year's NHL draft, is expected to announce he's going to be heading to Penn State University for his draft year, leaving the Medicine Hat Tigers of the CHL. What does this moment mean to the traditional pipeline that we've come to understand in the hockey world?
Well, yeah, it is a bit of a watershed moment. It's obviously this has kind of been trending in this direction for the last little bit. It's only been a few months since the NCAA made the ruling that would allow CHL players to gain eligibility. They were, expressly written into the rules as not being eligible to play college hockey, viewed more as professionals. But now in this modern era, they made this change, and I think it's a good change for everybody. And hopefully, most importantly, it's a good change for the players. But in terms of what Gavin McKenna himself, obviously the CHL Player of the Year, had this tremendously productive season, had this remarkable 55 game point streak that he was on throughout the season. And so when you see a player like him, not every player, even Easton Cowan, you think of the guys like that, hey, there's still more that can be gained from playing in junior hockey. I think that we've seen Gavin McKenna kind of reach the peak of what he was going to be able to do. And so now he's taking on this new challenge with this opportunity to play college. And by going to Penn State specifically, he's going to a place where they actually have not had one NHL regular they had Casey Bailey, who played for the Leafs for about a minute, and they've had a couple of guys that have had, cups of coffee, but they haven't had a regular. And they have Jackson Smith coming in this year, and now Gavin McKenna. And what it means is now you've got one of the most influential junior hockey players. All the young guys are watching what Gavin McKenna is going to do. And now they're seeing him take this, pretty substantial step in not just going to college hockey, but going to a program that isn't necessarily one of the blue bloods. And yes, they have NIL money and they have other things and have a lot of advantages that some smaller schools don't. But it's an opportunity for him to really put his mark on a program and leave college hockey as one of the most important recruits we've ever seen.
So, what we always do is we take what's happening and project it forward. This deal is reported to be $700,000. I don't know where all that comes from or how they get there. But also when you add in the new quirk of the CBA where you don't have to, your rights don't expire with your team that drafts you until you're 22, which is 2 more years added. It almost creates an entirely new avenue for that, doesn't it?
It really does. I think that, this would be a unique circumstance. I think most hockey players are not going to be able to earn that kind of money in NIL. We've heard of other 6-figure deals that have kind of been out there, but nothing really confirmed. This is the first time that we've heard this. It does sound like Penn State was able to offer substantially more than other schools were willing to or could part with. And so that's another thing. I think it was important for Gavin McKenna in this process to get as much as he possibly could because he has the highest earning potential of any hockey player. And if he takes, the highest amount, that does open kind of the door for some of these other players to earn higher dollars. Now, for guys that are going to go into the NHL immediately out of college, it wouldn't necessarily make much sense for them to stick around. But for the guys that know that, hey, I'm probably going to have to spend a couple of years in the AHL, well, you can actually potentially make more money in college than you could in the AHL because the ELC goes down to under $100,000. So we're talking about opportunities for players to extend their playing careers in college if they feel like that's best for them. I think in most cases, we're still going to see players making the decision that gets them to the NHL as fast as they possibly can. Having that longer tail on signing rights is definitely beneficial to the players and to the teams, especially with contract limits being what they are. Maybe you can kind of defer a kid for an extra year or maybe 2. So there's a lot of benefits to that. But absolutely, the NIL situation has changed the game, and we're starting to learn more too about what teams opting into this house settlement where there's actual revenue sharing happening with these schools. And some schools will give most of that money to their football and basketball programs, but in some cases, the hockey programs could benefit from that as well.
Chris, speaking to people around this whole situation, I've heard the argument that from a player development standpoint, yeah, the CHL is a proven road. There's no doubt about it. But you do play, 70 plus games plus playoffs. You're on the road a lot. From an athletic development perspective, I've heard people say, hey, you're better off to go to the U.S., play a 38. I think Penn State played 38 games last year. You get more time in the weight room to build your body, build your speed, build your physique. Matthew Nyes is a good example, who came into Toronto after being at the University of Minnesota with a really good strength program and was a chiseled specimen who obviously could compete against men right out of the box. I mean, have you heard much on that front, just in terms of the pros and cons of these two systems that are now at war?
It's really interesting because back when CHL players couldn't go to the NCAA, one of the recruiting negatives was viewed as the lack of games played, and that has shifted. I think as more people have understood the value of the additional time away from playing games, where there is more practice time, where there is a more dedicated strength and conditioning program, where there is easier travel, so that there's less time spent on a bus and more time spent in the weight room or on the ice. And so there are benefits. But what I'll say is that the CHL is decades and decades of proven development as well. There is no one size fits all for all of these players. I think for a player in Gavin McKenna's case in particular, what are the things that he needs to do to be ready to play in the NHL day one? He's got to get stronger. That's probably the number one thing. He's a bit of a slight build. He's got good enough size. He's incredibly quick. Obviously very skilled, but you want to see him get stronger. You want to see him get a little more endurance, different things like that. That will help him, and I think that that's a reason to potentially take that route. The other thing that's important about college hockey is that the age gap between the players. He'll be a 17 going into 18-year-old as he plays college hockey. And some of the guys in college hockey are 22, 23, 24 years old. So they are older, they're stronger, and they're more experienced. So that's another thing. There's a lot of differences between the two. Both have great benefits. I don't think that this is a replacement. It is just an alternative option. And for players like Gavin McKenna, it certainly seems to make sense for them.
Well, Gavin McKenna kind of opens the floodgates for a lot of guys to maybe make that crossover from the CHL to NCAA. Like, if you're Dan McKenzie, the president of the Canadian Hockey League, I mean, how are you feeling about all of this? And maybe, how can you limit that potential exodus?
Well, I think, there's a way where everybody can win. I think, the CHL is probably going to have to get younger. They're going to have to institute, probably more 16-year-olds will get opportunities earlier than they would have. I do think that there is going to be this idea of competition, and competition requires, investing and doing more. And I think we've seen a number of OHL teams, a number of, WHL teams, QMJHL teams that have invested in facilities, in weight training, in additional things like that. You're seeing the same thing in the USHL, where there's money going into those programs to try to better compete. And so, I think that that's part of it. Competition does breed improvement of all things, and hopefully there's an opportunity there. I think, as Dan McKenzie has approached this, and I think that a lot of the commissioners in the CHL leagues, they have an understanding of this option that's available to players. They're not resistant to it because they know that there's still going to be a large number of players. But the other thing, that there is a benefit to this. There will be more American players. There will be some more European players that will choose the CHL that wouldn't have, because it was not possible to go to college afterwards. So I do think you're going to see that. And then you think about the guys like Adam Fantilli, Macklin Celebrini, Owen Power, who chose to go to the USHL. They now have this additional option available to them. So I think the CHL, because of this, will get a bit younger, but it doesn't have to get worse. It might get a little less experienced. You might have fewer 20-year-olds playing, might have fewer overagers, but there is still going to be a very valid and good development path throughout junior hockey in North America, because of the pool continues to deepen as hockey gets more widespread and we see more players interested in the North American development model.